Now we're going to start chapter 15. Mr. Pendanski filled the canteen. The warden got a pitchfork out of the back of the pickup truck. She poked through X-Ray's dirt pile to see if anything else might have been buried in it there as well. After I drop off X-Ray, I want you to bring back 3 wheelbarrows, she said. X-Ray got in the pickup. As the truck pulled away, he leaned out of the wide window and waved. 0, said the warden. I want you to take over X-Ray's hole. She seemed to know 0 was the fastest digger. Armpit and Squid, you will keep digging where you have been, she said. But each of you are going to have a helper. Zigzag, you help Armpit. Magnet will help Squid. And Caveman, you'll work with 0. We're going to dig the dirt twice. 0 will dig it out of the hole, and Caveman will carefully shovel it into the wheelbarrow. Zigzag will do the same for Armpit, and the same with Magnet and Squid. We don't want to miss anything. If either of you find something, you'll both get the day off and a double shower. When the wheelbarrows are full, you are to dump them away from this area. We don't want any dirt piles to get in the way. The warden remained at the site for the remainder of the day, along with Mr. Pendanski and Mr. Sir, who showed up after a while. Occasionally, Mr. Sir would leave to take water to the other groups of the campers, but otherwise, he and the water truck stayed parked there. The warden saw to it that nobody in Group D was ever thirsty. Stanley did what he was told. He carefully looked through all the dirt that was dug up by 0 as he shoveled it into the wheelbarrow, though he knew they wouldn't find anything. It was easier than digging his own hole. When the wheelbarrow was full, he took it a good distance away before dumping it. The warden couldn't keep still. She kept walking around, looking over the boy's shoulders and sticking her pitchfork through the dirt piles. You're doing just fine, she told Stanley. After a while, she told the boys to switch places so that Stanley, Zigzag, and Magnet dug the holes, and 0, Armpit, and Squid shoveled the excavated dirt into the wheelbarrows. After lunch, 0 took over the digging again, and Stanley returned to the wheelbarrow. There's no need to hurry, said the warden several times. The main thing is not to miss anything. The boys dug until each hole was well over 6 feet deep and wide. It was easier for 2 boys to dig a 6-foot hole than it was for 1 boy to dig a 5-foot hole. All right, that's enough for today, said the warden. I've waited this long. I can wait another day. Mr. Sir drove her back to the cabin. I wonder how she knew all our names, Stanley said as they walked back to the compound. She watches us all the time, said Zigzag. She's got hidden microphones and cameras all over the place. In tents, in the rec rooms, the shower. The shower, said Stanley. He wondered if Zigzag was just being paranoid. The cameras are tiny, said Armpit. No bigger than the toenail on your little toe. Stanley had his doubt about that. He didn't think that they could make cameras that small. Microphones? Maybe. He realized that was why X-Ray didn't want him to talk to him about the gold tube at breakfast. Alexa, stop. X-Ray was afraid the warden might be listening. One thing was certain. They weren't just digging to build character. They were definitely looking for something. And whatever they were looking for it in the wrong place. Think about, how does Stanley know that? Stanley gazed out across the lake toward the spot where he had been digging yesterday when he found the gold tube. He dug the hole into his memory. Chapter 16. As Stanley entered the rec room, he could hear X-Ray's voice from all the way across the room. See what I'm saying, said X-Ray. Am I right or am I right? The other bodies in the room were little more than bags of flesh and bones, dumped across broken chairs and couches. X-Ray was full of life, laughing and waving his arms around as he talked. Yo, caveman, my man, he called out. Stanley made his way across the room. Hey, slide on over, Squid, said X-Ray. Make room for the caveman. Stanley crashed onto the couch. He had looked for the hidden camera in the shower. he hadn't seen anything, and he hoped that the warden hadn't either. "What's the matter?" he asked Caveman. "You guys tired or something?" He laughed. "Hey, keep it down, will you?" groaned Zigzag. "I'm trying to watch TV." Stanley glanced uncertainly at Zigzag, who was staring very intently at the busted television screen. The warden greeted the boys at breakfast the next morning and went with them to their holes. 4 dug in the holes and 3 tended to the wheelbarrows. "Glad you're here, X-Ray," she said to him. "We'll need your sharp eyes." Stanley spent more time pushing the wheelbarrow than digging because he was such a slow digger. He carted away the excess dirt and dumped it into the previously dug holes. He was careful not to dump any of it in the hole where the gold tube was actually found. He could still see the tube in his mind. It seemed so familiar, but he just couldn't place it. He thought that it might have been the lid to the fancy gold pen. KB could have been the initials of a famous author. The only famous authors he could think of were Charles Dickens, William Shakespeare, and Mark Twain. Besides, it didn't really look like the top of a pen. By lunchtime, the warden was beginning to lose her patience. She made them eat quickly so they could get back to work. "If you can't get them to work any faster," she told Mr. Sir, "then you're going to have to climb on down there and dig with them." After that, everyone worked faster, especially when Mr. Sir was watching them. Stanley practically ran when he pushed his wheelbarrow. Mr. Sir reminded them that they weren't Girl Scouts. They didn't quit digging until after every other group had finished. Later, as Stanley sat sprawled across the understuffed chair, he tried to think of a way to tell the warden where the tube was really found, without getting himself or X-Ray into trouble. It didn't seem possible. He even thought about sneaking out at night and digging in the hole by himself. But the last thing he wanted to do after digging all day was dig at night too. Besides, the shovels were locked up at night, presumably so they couldn't be used as weapons. Mr. Pendanski entered the rec room. "Stanley?" he called as he made his way over. "His name's Caveman," said X-Ray. "Stanley," said Mr. Pendanski. "My name's Caveman," said Stanley. "Well, I have a letter for someone named Stanley Yelnat," said Mr. Pendanski. He turned over the envelope in his hands. "It doesn't say Caveman anywhere." Thanks," Stanley said, taking it. It was from his mother. "Who's it from?" Squid asked. "Your mother?" Stanley put it in his big pocket of his pants. "Aren't you going to read it to us?" asked Armpit. "Give him some space," said X-Ray. "If Caveman doesn't want to read it to us, he doesn't have to. It's probably from his girlfriend." Stanley smiled. He read it later, after the other boys had gone to dinner. "Dear Stanley, it was wonderful to hear from you. Your letter made me feel like one of the other moms who could afford to send their kids to summer camp. I know it's not the same, but I'm very proud that you're trying to make the best of a bad situation. Who knows, maybe something good will come from this. Your father thinks he's real close to a breakthrough on his sneaker project. I hope so. The landlord is threatening to evict us because of the odor. I feel sorry for the little old lady who lived in the shoe. It must have smelled awful. Love from both of us." "What's so funny?" Zero asked. It startled him. Zero had gone to dinner with the others, or he thought Zero had gone to dinner with the others. Nothing, just something my mom wrote." "What'd she say?" Zero asked. "Nothing." "Oh, sorry," said Zero. "Well, see, my dad is trying to invent a way to recycle old sneakers. So the apartment kind of smells bad because he's always cooking these old sneakers. So anyway, in the letter, my mom said that she felt sorry for the little old lady who lived in the shoe. You know, because it must have smelled bad in there." Zero stared blankly at him. "You know the nursery rhyme?" Zero said nothing. "You've heard the nursery rhyme about the little old lady who lives in the shoe?" "No." Stanley was amazed. "How does it go?" asked Zero. "Didn't you ever watch Sesame Street?" Stanley asked. Zero stared blankly. Stanley headed on to dinner. He would have felt pretty silly reciting nursery rhymes at Camp Green Lake. All right, chapter 17. For the next week and a half, the boys continued to dig in the area around where X-Ray had supposedly found the gold tube. They widened X-Ray's hole as well as the holes of Armpit and Squid had been digging, until the fourth day when all three holes met and formed one big hole. As the days wore on, the warden became less and less patient. She arrived later in the morning and left earlier in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the boys continued to dig later and later. This is no bigger than it was, This is no bigger than when it was when I left you yesterday, she said after arriving late one morning, well after sunrise. What have you all been doing down there? Nothing, said Squid. That was the wrong thing to say. Just at that moment, Armpit was returning from a bathroom break. How nice of you to join us, she said. And what have you been doing? I had to, go. And the warden jabbed at Armpit with her pitchfork, knocking him backward into the big hole. The pitchfork left 3 holes in the front of his shirt and 3 tiny spots of blood. You're giving these boys too much water, said the warden to Mr. Pendanski. They continued to dig until late afternoon, long after all the other groups had finished for the day. Stanley was down in the big hole, along with the other 6 boys, and they had stopped using the wheelbarrows. He had dug his shovel into the side of the hole. He scooped up some dirt and was raising it to the surface when Zigzag's shovel caught him in the side of the head. He collapsed. He wasn't sure if he passed out or not, but he looked up to see Zigzag's wild head staring down at him. I ain't digging up that dirt up, said Zigzag. That's your dirt. Hey, Mom, said Magnet. Caveman's been hurt. Stanley brought his fingers up to the side of his neck. He felt his wet blood and a pretty big gash below his ear. Magnet helped Stanley to his feet and then out of the hole. Mr. Sir made a bandage out of a piece of sack of sunflower seeds and taped it over Stanley's wound. Then he told him to get back to work. This isn't nap time. When Stanley returned to his hole, Zigzag was waiting for him. That's your dirt, said Zigzag. You have to dig it up. It's covering up my dirt. Stanley felt a little dizzy. He could see the small pile of dirt. It took him a moment to realize that it was the dirt which had been on his shovel when he was hit. He scooped it up, and then Zigzag dug his shovel into the ground underneath it, where Stanley's dirt had been. All right, that's another one for another day.